In the second hour of the show, we're going to be talking to Afreen Fatima. She is going to talk about the Muslim Women's Auction app that has taken India by storm, much against the displeasure of Muslims. And of course, that is Islamophobia in play there. Also on the show, we'll be talking to Professor Andre Duvenage from Northwest University about the expropriation bill. And right now we are talking with Christo van der Reede. He is the Executive Director at AgriSA South Africa about the locust outbreak in certain parts of the country, particularly in the Northern and the Eastern Cape, and I think also in the Free State. A very good morning to you, Christo van der Reede. Welcome to the program. And a very worrying situation, is it not?
Good morning, and good morning to all of your listeners. And I would like to wish you all a very blessed and prosperous new year ahead. Indeed, this outbreak has been coming along since November last year. We've been warning government, and we've been interacting with the provincial governments, because government has a big responsibility in terms of helping us to curb this outbreak. But due to a very, very long drought, and now we've seen very, very good rains, this was to be expected. South Africa has a long history of these kind of outbreaks after a long spell of drought, so it was not unexpected. It's just very sad that we do not have the necessary measures in place to curb the spread of it, because it poses a particular risk.
Obviously, it's a risk not only to the farmers in that part of the country. We, as consumers in the urban areas, will feel the knock-on effects further down in the year once commodities become very scarce and prices go through the roof. That having been said, how does government, together with AgriSA and other interested parties, get together to mitigate something like this plague?
There's a massive responsibility, first and foremost, on the farmer. The farmer has to monitor these outbreaks. The farmer must be sure that they also have the necessary equipment and necessary pesticides in place. And obviously, one needs to be very careful in terms of just using pesticides at liberty, because you can damage and cause more harm to the environment. All of us are very conscious about living in balance with nature out there, and we need to be very careful. If you destroy one species, obviously it will have an impact on other species as well. For example, bees. And bees, on the other hand, is very important to pollinate plants and so forth. But I think the most important thing for us is that government has to come to the party in terms of the necessary supplies, the necessary manpower, especially on farmland that lies vacant at this point in time, especially state land that's under the custodianship of the state. Also farms that have been left dilapidated over time, and that's where our big outbreaks are currently happening. And then also in the reserve areas where there's no actual farming taking place. So it's a multitude of factors that lead to something like this. But given the fact that government has a serious challenge in terms of, or a fiscal challenge, the big dilemma is the lack of manpower and the lack of proper pesticides to curb the spread of this locust plague.
You did indicate that because of long stretches of droughts and then thereafter followed by plentiful rain, creates the situation of locust outbreak. And now you're also saying that abandoned land, land that's not being farmed, etc., also adds to the problem. How so? And in terms of the responsibility of farmers, what ought they be doing if they have unoccupied land next to their farms, which you are indicating could then create these locust type of outbreaks or other types of pests? What needs to be done?
I think that there needs to be very good cooperation, first and foremost, at local level. Remember, farmers all belong to farmer unions, and those farmer unions take responsibility for those farms that currently lie abandoned or even land that belongs to the state, just to monitor it. In addition to it, they need to work very closely with the local government department, especially the provincial agriculture department. They must make sure they have the necessary people in place, also the necessary expertise in place to strategize around how to go about to curb the spread of the locust. And then they must make sure that they have the necessary resources in place to assist them in curbing the spread of the locust. So I think that's the basis of this exercise. If those things are not in place, then you're going to have a situation where these, and we've already seen locusts are now moving across the Orange River into your areas where there's huge plants of maize and so forth. Now, given the fact that we've got good rains, hopefully farmers will be able to recover from that. We are very fortunate in South Africa that we've got very resilient farmers and very innovative farmers. And yes, our country will never be in a position that people will go hungry. But I think if this crisis exacerbates, then we're certainly going to have a problem with ample food supply later in the year.
So, Christo, explain to me, a city dweller, about the dangers of a locust outbreak, which we're experiencing right now. What exactly happens? How large are these swarms? And if they, if they then verge or if they then come onto your farmland, will they decimate it within a few minutes? Can you salvage anything from there? And if you do know that they are going to be targeting your land next, what is it that you can do to prevent them from destroying all of your crops? And then let's also look at the issue around danger to farm animals. Do they attack farm animals as well? And what about human beings? What do you do when you are caught in a storm of locusts?
That's quite a handful of questions.
Let's start with the first thing. I'm a farmer, and I know that the swarm is coming my way. How do I prepare to prevent major destruction and mayhem?
Yeah. So I was on a road trip that was towards the end of 2020, and we drove from Bloemfontein to Smithfield. And as we drove, we got these waves of locusts. But at that time, it's about, say, 100 meters in width and another 100 meters in breadth. So that doesn't really pose a serious problem. But you're right. You see, the big challenge is if you can trap them while they're still on the ground and they do not fly. And then you will be able to then use pesticides to kill them off. But the moment they start flying, then you're in trouble. So what we've seen is that large swarms have now merged. And once they merge, they become this, 10 kilometer to 20 kilometer long swarms. And you talk about millions and millions of these animals. Mm-hmm. Now, they don't actually pose a threat to humans or to animals, but it becomes a massive irritation, obviously. And cars on the road can get caught up in these storms or swarms of locusts. And if a driver cannot see, obviously, then it becomes a very dangerous situation. So, but I think the biggest challenge, obviously, if they land on a maize field, they can decimate that field within hours. They eat up everything, and then they continue to fly, and then they lay the eggs, and then the cycle starts all over again. So, as I said, we've got a long, locust has been around for millions of years. In South Africa and in Namibia in particular, we've got these massive outbreaks. I've learned also a new generation of brown locusts that have started to develop in Namibia, and now they're coming towards South Africa. So that for us is a big worry. You know, if you have swarm after swarm and new births, then you're going to have problems because you can deal perhaps with one swarm of locusts. But if there's consecutive swarms of locusts coming onto your farm, then I don't know how that farmer and the farm workers are going to survive.
And are they only attracted to maize fields or anything
Anything
in their
that
path?
looks green, yeah, anything that looks green and that they can eat, they will come for that. And you know, other problem is if they strip the field bare of animal grazing, then you again in a serious problem. Because remember, many of these farmers have been experiencing drought for 5 to 8 years in those areas, and they have recovered very nicely after the good rains. Now the swarms of locusts come onto the fields, and they finish off the green sprouts, and they back at the beginning again. So yes, and nobody said farming is easy in South Africa, but
Sure.
it is a challenge, and I would like to appeal to your listeners to contact AgriSA. If there's some kind of assistance they can provide, please do so. We make sure it gets to the farmers, it gets to the farm workers, because ultimately it's the farmer that produces and the farm worker that produces the food that we enjoy every day.
Okay, what about travelers who are on the road in that part of the world, the Free State, the Eastern and the Northern Capes, and they then spot a swarm of locusts? Whom do they inform, and is that information important enough to pass on?
Yeah, I think it's important, should people travel and they see these swarms, that they contact the Department of Agriculture, because they are the key stakeholder in this. People can also contact the provincial agri offices like Agri Free State, Agri Northern Cape, and Agri Western Cape, if they see any of these locusts on the move. But the dilemma is you can report them in a particular area. After an hour or so, they've moved on, especially as they fly. You know, they only rest, during particular, then they go down and eat, and then they continue to fly, or they fall over and lay their eggs, and that's how the basic life cycle of a locust is all about.
Frightening indeed, because as you say, they lay their eggs. So even if the current swarm dies on, how long is their lifespan? How long does a locust live for? That doesn't mean that if their lifespan is short, they've already laid eggs, and those eggs are then going to obviously be your future swarms of locusts, suggesting that it's almost impossible to get rid of them entirely. Am I correct?
Indeed. If the climatic conditions are favorable, these locusts will flourish. It all depends. And I mean, we've got I may describe it as follows: we've got a sort of perfect situation. Long spell of drought, and now this massive rains that have fallen. And obviously it creates very favorable conditions for these outbreaks. Obviously, how long they live depends on how much they can eat during the day and grow to maturity. I'm not sure how long that takes, but I suspect it's 2 to 3 weeks or even a month. That's the life cycle of a grasshopper, and then or a locust, and then they lay the eggs, and then the next generation awaits to be born, and then the cycle starts all over again.
Locusts are actually, I'm just wondering, you spoke about the bees and how crucial bees are to our ecosystem and our environment. Are we then saying that locusts are not? They are the destroyers. So if we can find a solution to destroy them for once and for all, our ecosystem will be none the worse for not having locusts around. We do understand that every species has a role to play in the life cycle of the ecosystem. But I'm kind of getting a sense that a locust doesn't. They cause mayhem and damage and add nothing at all to our system.
Look, I'm not an environmentalist, nor am I, a person that has studied the science of locusts and so forth. But one can almost say the same thing of flies. But we know that flies, as part of the ecosystem, play a critical role. And to get rid of it means that you will create then other challenges. So yes, on the one hand, whilst locust creates a challenge for farmers and for food production, they also a food source for other animals, for example. And I think maybe it will be good if you can get somebody on this show that can talk to you about, the more detailed aspects of locusts and what they contribute, and if they become a big plague, how do you manage that from an environmental and a scientific point of view? I think it's very that could be very informative. Yeah.
I certainly will do so. Thank you indeed for talking to us this morning about the locust outbreak in the Free State, Western Cape and Northern Cape. It sounds like obviously a very frightening phenomena if you're living there and you get attacked or your farm gets attacked by one of these swarms. But I certainly will see if we can take this conversation further with an environmentalist. So thank you indeed for your time, and hopefully travelers in that part of the world will keep a lookout and inform the authorities when and if they do spot swarms of locusts. Christo van der Reede, the Executive Director of AgriSA South Africa, we thank you for your time. Go well and God bless.
Take care, and also greetings to your listeners. Bye-bye.
9:06 exactly. This is News and Views right here on Salam Media.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media.